Hello, welcome to the channel Wise Stories. Enjoy watching.
The woman came to the funeral of her former mother-in-law. At the church, she encountered her ex-husband and his pregnant mistress. But when, after the funeral, the late woman's bank safe was opened and the will was read. Autumn rain drummed against the window sill when Beatrice's phone rang with the melody of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. She had set that ringtone specifically for her mother-in-law, the only person from her former life who hadn't turned her back on her after the divorce. Beatrice put aside the folder with a little patient's medical history and picked up the phone. "Beatrice Diaz?" The unfamiliar male voice sounded formal and reserved. "Yes, this is she," she said, automatically adjusting her white medical coat. A tightness gripped her chest with a sense of foreboding. "My name is Sergio Rodriguez. I am Maria Ramirez's family lawyer. I regret to inform you that Maria Ramirez passed away last night. Heart attack. The doctors did everything they could, but..." Beatrice closed her eyes. Her hand, holding the phone, began to tremble. Outside the children's hospital where she had worked for 8 years, the rain continued to fall, and the world inside her felt emptier than ever. "When is the funeral?" was all she could manage to say. "The day after tomorrow, at 11 a.m., at St. Nicholas Church. After the funeral, there will be a gathering of close ones and the reading of the will. Maria Ramirez left clear instructions that you must be present." After hanging up, Beatrice stared out the window at the hospital courtyard for a long time. Children from the ward, allowed a brief walk, splashed through puddles. Normally, the sight would have made her smile, but now she felt nothing but emptiness and aching pain. At home, in her small rented apartment, Beatrice took down a box of photographs from the top shelf of the closet. She hadn't opened it in 5 years, hadn't stirred up the past. But now, after the news of Maria's death, something inside her broke. Here they were, she and Manuel, on their wedding day, young, happy. She wore a white dress with a small bouquet of wildflowers. Manuel knew she didn't like lavish roses. Here was a family dinner at her mother-in-law's country house, where Maria had taught her to bake her signature cherry pie from her own orchard. And here, a vacation together, suntanned faces, the sea in the background, Manuel's arm around her shoulders, and nothing foretold the coming disaster. Back then, she thought it would last forever. They were both doctors, both from medical families, planning to open a practice together. And then Luisa appeared, a young nurse fresh out of college. Beatrice had even helped her settle in, taking her under her wing. How could she not notice the glances exchanged between Manuel and Luisa? Why hadn't she paid attention to Manuel's late nights at work? His sudden business trips, his new cologne? Manuel left on a rainy evening much like this one. He packed his things and said he couldn't lie anymore. He had fallen in love with someone else and was leaving to be with her. Beatrice hadn't created scenes or thrown fits, she just stood and watched as he closed the door behind him on what was once their shared home. Soon, they had to sell the apartment to divide the property. The phone rang again, tearing her from her agonizing memories. The screen showed the name Victoria, Manuel's sister. "Beatrice, you already know?" Victoria's voice was muffled. It was clear she had been crying. "Yes, the lawyer called me. My condolences, Victoria. Mom really wanted you to come to the funeral. She spoke about you until the very end, still thought of you as a daughter, even after you and Manuel divorced." A lump rose in Beatrice's throat. Maria had indeed replaced the mother Beatrice had lost as a teenager. After the divorce, it was her mother-in-law who had supported her, who helped her hold herself together when she was left alone, betrayed by her husband and rejected by their mutual friends, who mostly took Manuel's side. "Will you come to the funeral?" Victoria asked carefully. Beatrice pinched the bridge of her nose between her fingers. Here it was, the moment of truth. Going meant facing Manuel. And if the rumors were true, his new wife would be there too, Luisa, who was said to be expecting a child. "Yes, of course. Your mother meant a lot to me." After speaking with Victoria, Beatrice brewed herself a strong tea and sat by the window. The rain intensified, hammering against the glass as if demanding to be let in. It was on a similar rainy day, 5 years ago, that she had come to Maria after the divorce, soaked through, her eyes swollen from crying. "You're strong, my girl," her mother-in-law had said then, stroking her hair. "This storm will pass, and you'll only become stronger." And she had become stronger, immersing herself in work, specializing in rare pediatric diseases, taking every shift she could, just to avoid being alone with her thoughts in an empty apartment. She had refused the dates her colleagues tried to arrange, insisting she needed to move on. But how could she move on when her soul had turned into a frozen shard? On the day of the funeral, the weather seemed tailor-made, gloomy and chilly. St. Nicholas Church, an old building with blue domes, welcomed Beatrice with the muted light of candles and the smell of incense. She hadn't been there since her own wedding 13 years ago. It felt both long ago and just yesterday. Beatrice chose a seat in the far corner, hoping to stay unnoticed at least until the end of the service. She wore a strict black dress and a matching scarf that covered her hair, the same hair Manuel used to love running his fingers through. The service had already begun when she spotted Manuel a few rows ahead. He stood by the coffin, visibly heavier, his dark suit straining across his shoulders. Beside him stood a young woman with neatly pinned-up blonde hair and a noticeably rounded belly. Luisa. Beatrice had seen her a few times over the years, but now Manuel's former mistress, now his wife, looked very different, more serious, more mature. Pregnancy had given her a special kind of femininity that Beatrice noticed with a painful pang of conscience. She herself had never become a mother, even though she and Manuel had planned for 2 children. Manuel wiped his eyes with a handkerchief. He had always been close to his mother, consulted her on all important matters. Beatrice wondered if he had sought his mother's advice when he decided to leave his wife for a young nurse. Her thoughts were interrupted when Victoria noticed her and began making her way through the gathered crowd. "Beatrice, you came." Victoria hugged her. She smelled the familiar perfume and home-baked goods, just like Maria. "Mom would have been so happy." "I couldn't not come," Beatrice replied quietly, feeling treacherous tears sting her eyes. At that moment, Manuel turned and saw them. Surprise crossed his face, then something resembling pain, then shame. He whispered something to Luisa and came toward them. "Hello, Beatrice," his voice was hoarse, as if unused for a long time. "Thank you for coming." "Mom, she loved you very much." Beatrice nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Standing next to her ex-husband, she felt once again like the lost, broken woman she had been 5 years ago. "Mom often talked about you," Manuel continued, shifting awkwardly. "She was proud of your achievements. She said you had become the best specialist in rare pediatric diseases in the city." She exaggerated. Beatrice finally found her voice. "I just work a lot." "You always did work a lot," a hesitant smile touched his lips. "Remember how I used to grumble that you spent more time with your patients than with me?" Yes, she remembered, as well as the fact that he eventually found comfort in the arms of someone who had more free time. Luisa approached, taking Manuel's arm with a possessive gesture. "Hello, Beatrice," her voice was soft, almost apologetic. "My condolences for your loss." Maria was an amazing woman. "Our loss," Beatrice corrected mentally, but remained silent, just nodding in response. Luisa looked genuinely saddened, and somehow, that hurt Beatrice more than if she had been arrogant. "Are you working in the children's department now?" Luisa asked, clearly trying to keep the conversation going. "I heard you're doing amazing things for children with rare diseases." "Yes, we recently received a grant to research autoimmune disorders in children under 7, Beatrice replied automatically. Talking about work had always been easier than talking about personal matters. Manuel was looking at her with a strange expression, a mix of admiration and regret. "Luisa and I moved to the capital 2 years ago," he said. "I'm working at a private clinic now. Not as exciting as your research, but the schedule is freer. So there's more time for family." Beatrice almost physically heard the unspoken words. Their awkward conversation was interrupted by the priest announcing the beginning of the funeral procession to the cemetery. Beatrice left the church, feeling an unexpected relief that the first, hardest meeting was now behind her. But the reading of the will still lay ahead, and they would have to spend much more time together. At the cemetery, a light drizzle was falling. Someone offered Beatrice an umbrella, and she was surprised to recognize Pablo Suarez, Maria's colleague with whom she had worked for over 30 years. "She often spoke of you, Beatrice," the elderly cardiologist said quietly. "She thought of you as her daughter in every sense except blood. She was closer to me than many of my blood relatives, too," Beatrice said, brushing away a tear that mixed with the raindrops on her cheek. When the coffin was being lowered into the ground, Beatrice threw in a handful of earth and whispered, "Thank you for everything, Maria. For believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." After the cemetery, everyone was invited to a memorial lunch at a nearby restaurant. Beatrice thought about declining, but Maria's lawyer, Sergio Rodriguez, gently insisted. Maria specifically asked that you be present for the reading of the will, which will take place after lunch. Please don't refuse. It was her last wish. The memorial was held in a private room at a small restaurant where Maria often gathered friends and colleagues. Beatrice chose a seat at the far end of the table, but Victoria insisted she sit next to her, nearly opposite Manuel and Luisa. "Mom would have wanted the whole family together," Victoria whispered, squeezing Beatrice's hand. Family, a strange word for their current relationships. But Beatrice didn't argue. At the table, they shared memories of Maria, her professional accomplishments, her wisdom, her kindness, and her principles. Everyone told a story connected to the late woman. When it was Beatrice's turn, she paused, gathering her thoughts. "Maria taught me the most important thing about being a doctor, to see the person behind the illness. Not the case, not the diagnosis, but the human being, with their fears, hopes, and pain. She always said that what makes medicine truly medicine isn't equipment, but compassion and attention to detail. I'll carry that lesson with me for the rest of my life." Manuel was staring at her intently, as if seeing her for the first time. Luisa, too, was watching her closely, and in the young woman's gaze there was something resembling envy. Beatrice looked away, feeling uncomfortable under their combined scrutiny. When the meal ended, the lawyer asked Maria's closest ones to stay for an important conversation. "We need to go to the bank," he announced. "Maria's safe with important documents is there. It must be opened in the presence of all individuals mentioned in the will." Beatrice looked at him in surprise. "Are you sure I need to be there? I'm no longer part of the family. Formally, Manuel and I divorced 5 years ago." "Absolutely sure," the lawyer answered firmly. "Maria Ramirez left clear instructions. You are one of the key people in her will." His words drew puzzled looks from Manuel and Luisa, but no one protested. Ahead of them lay the opening of the safe, an event that would turn their lives upside down. At the bank, they were greeted by a silver-haired man in a strict suit, the branch director, as the lawyer introduced him. A small group of Maria's closest people followed into a special room for working with safety deposit boxes. Soft lighting, muted tones, leather armchairs around a massive dark wood table, the atmosphere encouraged confidential conversations. "Please, everyone have a seat," the branch director gestured to the chairs. Maria left clear instructions regarding the opening of her safe and the announcement of its contents. Beatrice took a seat in the far corner of the table, feeling out of place among them. Besides her, there were Manuel with Luisa, Victoria, Pablo, Maria's longtime colleague, and Veronica Pascual, Maria's old friend from their student days. Manuel sat directly across from her, nervously tapping his fingers on the polished tabletop, a habit from university days that betrayed his agitation. Luisa gently placed her hand over his, as if trying to calm him. Meanwhile, the bank director left the room and soon returned carrying a medium-sized metal safe. "Senora Ramirez kept this safe with us for over 30 years, he explained, setting it on the table. "Opening it requires a special key and a code, which she entrusted to Mr. Rodriguez." Sergio Rodriguez nodded and pulled an envelope from the inside pocket of his jacket. Before we open the safe, I must read a letter from Maria Ramirez addressed to all present. He opened the envelope and began reading. My dear ones, if you are reading this letter, it means I have already left this world. I don't want you to be sad. I lived a long, full life, rich with love and meaning. I am grateful to fate for each of you, my children, friends, and colleagues. You made my life richer and brighter. Now, as my journey comes to an end, I want to set the final accents. Inside this safe are my will and a few personal letters. Please respect my final wishes, even if they seem unusual to you. Every decision was made out of love and concern for the future of those I hold dear. With love, Maria Ramirez. After finishing the letter, the lawyer carefully placed it back into the envelope and took out a small key. The bank director entered the code on the safe's digital panel, and then Sergio Rodriguez inserted the key into the lock. The mechanism clicked, and the lid of the safe slowly lifted. Inside lay a stack of documents and official folders, several sealed envelopes, and an antique redwood jewelry box with intricate inlays. Now I will read the main text of the will, the lawyer said, putting on his glasses and opening the first folder. I, Maria Ramirez, being of sound mind and memory, bequeath my property as follows. He began with the usual matters. The city apartment and the country house were left to Manuel. The antique porcelain collection, to Victoria. The scientific archive and medical library, to the medical academy where Maria had taught for many years. Beatriz listened absently, wondering why she had been asked to attend. Perhaps Maria had left her a keepsake, a book or a piece of jewelry, as a sign of their special bond. But then the lawyer's tone changed, becoming more formal. To my former daughter-in-law, Beatriz Ramirez, née Santana, I bequeath our ancestral home Cherry Orchard with its adjacent medical office, equipment, and land plot, located at. A ringing silence fell over the room. Beatriz felt the blood drain from her face. The Cherry Orchard ancestral home, the place Maria had always spoken about with such tenderness and love. The place where she had grown up, where she had returned every summer, where she had opened her first medical practice many years ago. As well as the sum of $10 million, kept in an account at this bank, the lawyer continued, under the condition that it be used to establish a children's clinic for rare diseases on the grounds of the Cherry Orchard estate. Manuel shot to his feet. His chair clattered to the floor. This must be a mistake. His voice trembled with outrage. Mother couldn't have. The Cherry Orchard has always been passed down through the male line. It's a family tradition. Sergio Rodriguez calmly removed his glasses and looked at Manuel. I assure you, Manuel, there is no mistake. Your mother made these changes to her will 2 months ago, after returning from the hospital where she suffered her first heart attack. The will was notarized with a medical evaluation of her mental capacity. Everything is absolutely legal. Luisa, no less pale than her husband, placed a protective hand over her rounded belly, as if shielding the future child. But the Cherry Orchard is a Ramirez family heirloom, isn't it? Her voice sounded confused and hurt. It should belong to the family, not to, she trailed off, casting a quick glance at Beatriz. I believe Maria Ramirez considered Beatriz part of her family, the lawyer remarked gently. In any case, her decision is final and legally flawless. Beatriz stayed silent, unable to fully comprehend what was happening. The Cherry Orchard and $10 million for a clinic? It was too much. Too generous, too unexpected, too complicated. There's one more thing, the lawyer continued, pulling a thick envelope from the safe with Beatriz written on it in calligraphic handwriting. This is a personal letter from Maria Ramirez addressed to you, Beatriz Diaz. You can read it here or later, in private. Beatriz took the envelope, feeling its weight. The stares from everyone in the room burned into her skin. Manuel looked at her with open shock and resentment. Luisa with confusion. Victoria with a strange sense of satisfaction. I'll read it now, Beatriz decided, realizing that the letter might explain this unbelievable decision. She carefully opened the envelope and unfolded several pages written in her mother-in-law's familiar neat handwriting. My dear Beatrice, if you are reading these lines, it means I am no longer with you. Forgive me for this little drama with the safe at the bank, but I wanted you to personally witness my son's reaction to my decision. Not out of revenge, believe me, but so that you could finally understand what I have known for a long time. Manuel made the biggest mistake of his life when he lost you. Beatrice flinched and briefly looked up from the letter, meeting Manuel's gaze. He sat with his head bowed, looking embarrassed and lost. Beatrice returned to the letter. After my first heart attack, Manuel stayed with me at the hospital. One evening, when he thought I was asleep, he sat by my bed and quietly said, "Mom, I ruined everything." Beatrice was the best thing that ever happened to me, and I didn't appreciate it. I asked him not to bother you with his belated remorse. It's worth nothing if not backed by actions. The cherry orchard was always my refuge, my true home. It's where I opened my first medical practice and treated patients who had no hope in regular hospitals. I know how much you lack the resources to fully help your little patients with rare diagnoses. I know how you suffer from the bureaucracy and formality of the state hospital. The cherry orchard is the perfect place for your clinic. The old house needs repairs, but its walls still hold the warmth of generations of Ramirez doctors and the gratitude of those who were healed there. The money I left should be enough for modern equipment and the clinic's first few years. I am confident you will manage the rest. You've always had a gift for administration, even Manuel admitted that. Beatrice turned the page, feeling a lump rise in her throat. Maria had always believed in her more than she believed in herself. I have no right to advise you on your personal life. You have done wonderfully after Manuel's betrayal, building your career, earning your colleagues' respect. But I saw how you closed yourself off from the world, how your beautiful smile faded. My final motherly advice, do not let past wounds poison your future. You deserve happiness, and if the path to it lies through forgiveness, find the strength to forgive. As for my son, I love him, but I have never turned a blind eye to his flaws, selfishness, arrogance, and an inability to cherish what he has. His marriage to Luisa did not bring him the happiness he hoped for. Youth and beauty are not a solid foundation for a true relationship. I see that he is beginning to realize that now. I am not asking you to return to him, that would be wrong. But perhaps you could find a new path toward each other as different people, wiser and more mature. Take care of yourself and heal the world with your gift. Always with you, your Maria. Beatrice slowly folded the letter, feeling tears stream down her cheeks. She lifted her eyes and met Manuel's gaze. In his eyes, she saw the same turmoil that raged inside her. Does it say anything about giving the cherry orchard back? He asked hoarsely. Beatrice shook her head. No. It talks about creating a clinic for children with rare diseases. Silence fell. Victoria was the first to break it. Mom always dreamed that the cherry orchard would become a place of healing again. Our grandfather used to treat patients from all over the region there. Then Mom carried on the tradition. But after our parents' divorce, the cherry orchard was abandoned. We only visited it a few times in the summers. Luisa rose heavily from her seat. I need some air, she muttered and quickly left the room. Manuel twitched, as if he wanted to follow her, but stayed sitting, staring at Beatrice with a strange mixture of resentment, curiosity, and something resembling admiration. What do you plan to do with the cherry orchard? He finally asked. Beatrice took a deep breath. I don't know yet, Manuel. This is all too unexpected. I need time to think it over. Have you even been to the cherry orchard? Do you know what condition it's in? The last time was about 8 years ago, when Maria and I went there to pick cherries for jam. The lawyer cleared his throat politely, drawing their attention. If I may, there is one more clause in the will that concerns both of you. Maria Ramirez left instructions that all decisions regarding the restoration of the cherry orchard and the establishment of the clinic must be made jointly by Beatrice and Manuel. I quote, I believe that working together on this noble project will benefit not only future patients but also them both. Now it was Beatrice's turn to jump from her seat. What? No, that's impossible. We haven't spoken in 5 years. How could we possibly work together? Mom always loved complicated setups, Victoria chuckled. Remember, Manuel, how she forced us to renovate the summer house together after our big fight? She said we would either reconcile through the work or kill each other. Either way, the problem would be solved. And? Did you reconcile? Beatrice asked involuntarily. Oh, we did, Victoria nodded. We still laugh about painting the fence and soaking each other with water in the heat. Manuel rubbed his face with his hands, as if trying to wake up from a strange dream. This isn't painting a fence, Victoria. This is a serious project with a huge budget. And he looked at Beatrice. And a very complicated history between the participants. The bank director, who had been silently observing everything, finally intervened. If you accept the inheritance, the first payment will be transferred to a special account within 3 days. You will both have access to the funds only if you agree jointly on all expenditures. Beatrice grabbed her bag and headed toward the exit. I need time to think. I'll get in touch with you tomorrow, she said to the lawyer. Beatrice, wait, Manuel caught up with her in the corridor. We need to talk. We needed to talk 5 years ago, she stopped, looking him straight in the eyes. Now I need to be alone and think carefully. Luisa is very upset right now. I need to find her. But, he hesitated, maybe we could meet tomorrow, have coffee, and calmly discuss everything? Beatrice hesitated. Part of her wanted to refuse immediately, to slam the door on this unwelcome opportunity to return to the past. But another part, the part that remembered Maria's words about forgiveness, whispered quietly, just listen to him. All right, she finally nodded. Tomorrow at 3 at the Bristol Cafe. I have to work afterward, so don't be late. Thank you, Manuel exhaled with visible relief. I'll be on time, I promise. Beatrice stepped out of the bank into the light autumn drizzle. People hurried by, shielding themselves with umbrellas. She stood under the awning, trying to process how her life had taken such a sharp turn in just a few hours. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. A message from Victoria. Mom always said you were the only one who could pull Manuel out of the mess he got himself into. Now I understand what she meant. Call me if you want to talk. Beatrice put the phone away, unsure how to respond. Maria Ramirez had orchestrated a complex plan even after her death. But why? To give her and Manuel a second chance? Or to finally force them to let go of the past and move on, separately? Tomorrow's conversation might bring some clarity to this tangled situation. For now, she just wanted to go home, take a hot bath, and try to come to terms with the idea that she was now the owner of the historic cherry orchard and a vast sum of money with a very specific purpose. Passing by the park, Beatrice noticed Luisa sitting on a bench. The young woman looked lost and distraught. For a moment, Beatrice considered approaching her but quickly dismissed the thought. What could she possibly say to the woman who had taken her husband? Luisa noticed her and gave a small nod, offering a faint, joyless smile. There was such a weary resignation in that gesture that Beatrice suddenly realized things weren't so perfect in Luisa's life either. Beatrice got into a taxi, gave her address, and leaned back, closing her eyes. The strange day was coming to an end, but she felt that it was only the beginning of a new chapter in her life, a chapter she had not expected and for which she was completely unprepared. Beatrice woke up to bright sunlight streaming through the half-closed curtains. Sleep hadn't brought relief. All night she had dreamt of Maria, of the cherry orchard, of fragmented conversations with Manuel. She reached for her phone. 8:30. There was still plenty of time before meeting her ex-husband. While brewing coffee, Beatrice tried to sort out the events of the previous day. 10 million and the historic cherry orchard for a children's rare disease clinic, working alongside Manuel, it all seemed surreal, like the plot of a melodramatic TV series rather than her own life. Her phone vibrated again. It was the head of her department. Senora Diaz, I heard you had a funeral yesterday. My condolences. Thank you. I didn't want to disturb you, But we have a new patient, a 6-year-old boy with suspected Guillain-Barré syndrome. His parents insist on a consultation specifically with you." Beatrice immediately switched into professional mode. "I'll be there in an hour. Please prepare all the test results and schedule an electromyography." Immersing herself in work had always saved her in difficult moments. Now it was especially necessary to distract herself from thoughts of the upcoming meeting with Manuel. Time flew by at the hospital. Little Mateo turned out to be a genuinely complicated case. His symptoms suggested a rare form of autoimmune disease, but other possibilities had to be ruled out. Beatrice ordered additional tests, reassured the frightened parents, and promised to do everything possible. Heading to the cafe, she caught herself thinking that the idea of opening her own clinic, where she could fully focus on such cases, didn't seem so far-fetched anymore. In the city hospital, there was never enough time, equipment, or resources for in-depth diagnostics. And children with rare diseases usually had the least time to spare. The Bristol Cafe was located in an old mansion. Beatrice had chosen it deliberately, a neutral place with no memories of their former life together. Manuel was already waiting at a table by the window, visibly nervous, fidgeting with the menu and tapping his fingers on the table. "Hi." He stood up when she approached. "I ordered you a cinnamon latte. You always loved it." "Thank you." Beatrice sat down across from him, trying to look calm and composed. "I came to talk about the inheritance and what to do with it." Manuel sighed. "I understand, but first, I'd like to say something personal. Could you just listen? 5 minutes, no more." She nodded, sipping the coffee. It was indeed a cinnamon latte, just the way she liked it. Amazing that he remembered such details after all these years. "Mom was right in her letter," Manuel began, looking straight into her eyes. "I made the biggest mistake of my life when I lost you. I won't try to justify myself or explain how it happened. The only thing that matters is that I have regretted it every single day for the past 5 years." Beatrice listened silently, surprised at how detached she felt hearing these words. Once, she had dreamed of such a confession, had cried into her pillow imagining him begging for forgiveness. But now she felt only a faint sadness for what could have been, but wasn't. "I'm not asking for forgiveness or, even less, for you to come back," Manuel continued. "I just wanted you to know. Now, about the inheritance. I spoke with the lawyer this morning. Mom planned everything to the last detail. We can refuse the inheritance, but then the cherry orchard will be sold, and the money will go to a charity for children with rare diseases. The clinic will be built anyway, just elsewhere and without our involvement." "And what does Luisa think?" Beatrice asked. "She seemed very upset yesterday." Manuel grimaced. "We had a big fight last night. She thinks I should contest the will, claim that Mom was mentally unfit when she changed it." "And you?" "I won't do it," he said firmly. "Mom knew exactly what she was doing. Besides, she's right about the clinic. It's a good idea. It's exactly the kind of project you needed." Beatrice looked at him in surprise. "Me? How would you know what I needed?" "I followed your career all these years," Manuel admitted, looking embarrassed. "I read your articles in medical journals, asked mutual friends about you. I know you've become a leading specialist in pediatric rare diseases. I know you've often said there's a desperate need for a specialized center for these children." Beatrice felt an odd flutter of emotion. She had never imagined that Manuel still cared about her life after their separation. "The question is whether we can work together," she said, steering the conversation back to the main topic. "We have a complicated history, Manuel. I know. And I'm not going to pressure you. I suggest we start by visiting the cherry orchard together. See its condition for ourselves. I was there 3 months ago when I visited Mom. Honestly, it's in better shape than I expected. The house is sturdy, it needs cosmetic work, but the foundation and walls are solid. And the medical wing could be fully renovated for modern needs." Beatrice thought for a moment. Seeing the estate firsthand sounded like a reasonable step. and one visit didn't obligate her to anything. Fine, she nodded. When do you suggest? I'm free this weekend, Manuel said, a flicker of hope in his eyes. I could pick you up Saturday morning. I have a shift on Saturday, Beatrice shook her head. But I'm free on Sunday. Let's meet there directly. I'll come by taxi. As you wish, Manuel agreed. I'll send you the exact address and time. They agreed on the details, and Beatrice stood up to leave. Beatrice, Manuel stood too. Thank you for agreeing to meet, and for even considering working together. She nodded, unsure what to say. As she exited the cafe, a waitress caught up to her. Your companion asked me to give you this, she said, handing her a small bundle. Already in the taxi, Beatrice unwrapped the paper. Inside was an antique silver brooch shaped like a cherry branch, with tiny ruby berries. This belonged to great-grandmother, said the note written in Manuel's handwriting. Mom wanted you to have it, whether you accepted the inheritance or not. Beatrice ran her finger over the delicate silver leaves. She remembered this brooch. Maria had worn it on special occasions. Manuel's sentimental gesture unexpectedly touched her. Sunday turned out to be surprisingly warm and sunny for mid-autumn. Beatrice sat in the taxi, watching as the urban scenery gave way to suburban landscapes, and then to the countryside. The cherry orchard was located about 40 kilometers from the city, in a picturesque spot on the banks of a small river. When the taxi turned onto the long linden alley leading to the house, Beatrice's heart began to race. She remembered this road. She and Manuel had come here several times in the early years of their marriage, and later for rare visits with her mother-in-law. The old linden trees, seemingly planted by Manuel's great-grandfather, formed a green arch overhead, with sunbeams breaking through the leaves. Finally, the house appeared, a two-story building in classical style, with white columns and a wide terrace. Nearby stood a smaller building, the medical office where Maria had once treated patients. A black SUV was parked by the porch. Manuel came out to meet her as the taxi pulled up. You're here, he said with a smile. I've already opened up the house and aired out the rooms. Do you want to start with the main house or the medical wing? Let's start with the main house, Beatrice decided, glancing around. The grounds of the cherry orchard looked abandoned but not neglected. It was clear the main buildings had been maintained, although the orchard itself had partly grown wild. Inside, the house smelled of old wood, dust, and, oddly enough, apples. In the spacious hall, the original furniture remained, a massive oak table, carved chairs, and a mirror in a bronze frame. Nothing has changed here for 100 years, Manuel said, running his hand along the polished surface of the table. Can you imagine? My great-grandmother used to receive guests here. Grandfather was a famous surgeon. He even operated on some high-ranking officials. They slowly walked through the first floor, the living room with its fireplace, the library with floor-to-ceiling shelves, and the dining room with its long mahogany table. Everywhere, there was an atmosphere of time standing still, but not decay. Mom came here every month, Manuel explained, noticing Beatrice's surprised look. She hired local women for cleaning, kept the heating running in winter. She never gave up hope that one day the house would come alive again. Upstairs was the bedroom. Maria had set up her office there, a small room with a desk by the window, overlooking the cherry orchard that gave the estate its name. It needs some renovations, but you could live here already, Manuel said as they returned to the hall. Now let's go see the medical wing. The medical wing was connected to the main house by a covered gallery. It had once been a hospital with 10 beds, then a private practice run first by Manuel's grandfather and later by Maria. For the last 15 years, it had stood empty. Inside, it was cool and dim. The old medical equipment was long gone. Only cabinets, empty cots, and walls darkened by time remained. It'll need a complete rebuild, Beatrice said, estimating the scale of the work. A modern clinic would require different rooms, a different layout. I've already spoken with an architect, Manuel nodded. He said it would be easier to tear it down and rebuild than to remodel, but we can preserve the exterior to maintain the historic look of the cherry orchard. Beatrice looked at him suspiciously. You've already spoken to an architect? When did you have time? Manuel looked slightly embarrassed. Yesterday, right after our meeting. I figured, no matter what you decide, it would be good to understand the scale of the project. They left the medical wing and headed toward the orchard. The old cherry trees, probably planted by Manuel's great-grandfather, were still bearing fruit. Do you remember how we used to pick cherries here for jam? Manuel asked unexpectedly. You stood on a ladder and tossed cherries into my sun hat. I remember, Beatrice smiled. And then we overate, and you had a stomachache. And you said, what kind of doctor are you if you can't even control your eating? Manuel laughed. They sat on an old bench under the largest tree. Beatrice, have you decided what you're going to do about the inheritance? Manuel asked, suddenly serious. Beatrice sighed. You know, after that case with little Mateo I told you about, I've been thinking a lot about a specialized clinic for children with rare diseases. At the city hospital, there's always a lack of time, equipment, and specialists. Here, we could create something unique. So you agree with Mom's idea? Yes, but I'm not sure I can handle organizing such a massive project. Besides, don't you think the cherry orchard should belong to you? After all, you're a Ramirez. Manuel shook his head. Mom knew what she was doing. I never cared about the cherry orchard the way she wanted me to. After the divorce, I stopped coming here altogether. I have my life in the capital, my practice, which I'm not willing to leave. But what about the condition that we work together on the project? Beatrice reminded him. I can consult, help with construction and legal matters, but you should run the clinic, Beatrice. You're the best pediatric rare disease specialist I know. You have no idea how much has to be organized, Beatrice said thoughtfully. Getting licenses, hiring staff, buying equipment, building partnerships with other clinics. I do have an idea, Manuel nodded. And I'm ready to help. I have a lot of contacts in the medical field. I know who to reach out to for advice on any issue. And what about Luisa? Beatrice asked. Yesterday, you said she was against the idea. Manuel looked away. Luisa went back to the capital yesterday. She said she needed time to think about our relationship. Honestly, things had been strained between us for months. That child, he hesitated. Well, I'm not sure it's mine. Beatrice stared at him in shock. What? You doubt the paternity? Luisa admitted that she had been seeing her ex when we had a fight 6 months ago. He's younger, works as a fitness trainer. I found out by accident, saw a message on her phone. And now? I don't know, Manuel admitted honestly. We'll do a paternity test after the baby is born. If it's mine, I'll take care of the child no matter what happens between me and Luisa. If not, then it wasn't meant to be. Beatrice didn't know what to say. Strangely, Manuel's situation mirrored what had happened to her 5 years ago: betrayal, lies, shattered hopes. She didn't feel any gloating, only genuine sympathy. I'm sorry, Manuel, she said quietly. Don't be, he shrugged. Maybe it's karma. I treated you badly, and now I'm paying the price. They sat in silence, watching the river shimmer through the trees. So, about the clinic, Manuel finally said. Are you willing to accept the inheritance and take on the project? Beatrice looked around, at the old house, the medical building, the cherry orchard, a place full of history and memories, ready to find new life and new meaning. Wasn't this what Maria had wanted? I agree, she nodded. But I'll need your help, especially in the beginning. I'll come every weekend, Manuel promised, and I'll always be available if any questions or problems arise. Then it's a deal, Beatrice said, extending her hand, and Manuel shook it carefully. It was their first touch in 5 years, and she was surprised to feel nothing special, no pain, no bitterness, no sadness. Maybe she had truly let go of the past. First, we need to commission a reconstruction plan for the medical building, Beatrice said in a businesslike tone. Then make a list of necessary equipment, start recruiting staff, and figure out where you'll stay during the construction, Manuel added. The main house is livable, but commuting to the city every day would be tough. I could move here temporarily during my vacation, Beatrice mused, work on the paperwork, oversee the start of construction, and then we'll see. They sat on the bench for a long time, discussing the future project. The sun was setting, painting the tops of the trees in golden hues. Beatrice felt a strange peace and certainty. For the first time in years, she had a goal that truly inspired her and filled her life with meaning. Time to head back to the city, she finally said, standing up. I need to prepare for tomorrow and start drafting my resignation letter. I'll drive you, Manuel offered. It's not easy to get a taxi from here. On the way back, they barely spoke, each lost in their own thoughts. Beatrice watched the landscapes fly by and thought about how unexpectedly life could turn. Who would have thought that, 5 years after their painful divorce, she would be sitting in her ex-husband's car, discussing a joint project? We're here, Manuel said, stopping by her house. Call me once you set the moving date to the estate. I'll help you with your things. Thank you, she said, opening the door but hesitating before getting out. You know, Manuel, I don't regret agreeing to this project. Maria was a wise woman. She knew this was exactly the kind of work I needed. Me too, he said quietly. Something real, important, not just a private practice for money. Beatrice nodded and got out of the car. Ahead lay a new stage in her life, full of unknowns, but also new opportunities. The revival of the cherry orchard had only just begun. 3 months had passed since Beatrice had decided to lead the clinic project at the cherry orchard. Winter was snowy and cold, covering the estate in a white blanket lit by the bluish light of the December sun. Beatrice moved in right after New Year's, realizing it would be easier to supervise construction while living on site. The main house turned out to be surprisingly warm and cozy even in the cold. The old heating system, upgraded during Maria's lifetime, worked perfectly. Manuel came every weekend, helping with organizational matters. They established clear boundaries, only work-related conversations, no personal topics unless they directly involved the project. This approach helped avoid awkwardness and maintain a professional relationship. The old medical building had been completely demolished in late autumn, and now the walls of a new, modern structure were rising in its place. The project had been designed by a young architect recommended by Manuel, a 2-story building with panoramic windows and a winter garden at the center, perfectly blending with the landscape of the historic cherry orchard. That cold January evening, Beatrice sat in an old armchair by the fireplace in the living room, reviewing resumes of potential employees. Building the team was perhaps the hardest task. The clinic was 40 kilometers from the city, and not many qualified specialists were willing to commute daily. The doorbell rang. Beatrice put the papers aside and went to answer, wondering who could be visiting at this hour. On the porch stood Manuel, dusted with snow, holding 2 large bags. Sorry for the intrusion, he said as he stepped inside. The train was canceled because of the snowstorm, and it's impossible to get a taxi from the city. May I stay here for the night? We have a meeting with the equipment suppliers tomorrow. Of course, Beatrice nodded. Your old room upstairs is ready for guests. Want some tea? I'd love some, Manuel said, brushing the snow from his coat. I brought groceries too. Thought I'd deliver them tomorrow, but since I'm here. In the kitchen, while the kettle was boiling, Manuel unpacked the groceries, fresh bread, cheese, fruit, and some canned goods. I heard from the workers that you hardly ever leave the cherry orchard, he said, glancing at her tired face. They're worried you're not eating properly. The workers are monitoring my diet now? She chuckled, pulling out some cups. Violetta, the cook, says you barely touch the lunches she makes. I've been busy. Sometimes I forget to eat, Beatrice shrugged. I didn't think it would become a topic for public discussion. Don't be mad, Manuel placed a cup of fragrant tea in front of her. Everyone just sees how hard you're working. you've lost weight. You look tired." Beatrice took a sip of tea, feeling its warmth spread through her. Indeed, she had been working almost non-stop in recent weeks, coordinating projects, negotiating with suppliers, recruiting staff. "I'm just used to taking care of you," Manuel added quietly. "Sorry if I'm overstepping." "It's okay," she lifted her gaze. "It's just unusual to hear that after everything that's happened." There was a pause. Manuel fiddled with his cup, clearly searching for words. "How's the staff recruitment going?" he finally asked, steering the conversation back to business. "Have you found anyone good?" "I have a few candidates," Beatrice said, brightening up, grateful for the topic shift. "My former colleague, Teresa, a pediatric neurologist, agreed to join us. And a young anesthesiologist, Silvio, very talented. But finding specialists in rare diseases is still tough." "What about Pablo Suarez? Remember Mom's colleague? He's retired now but still full of energy. Maybe he'd agree to work as a consultant?" "Good idea," Beatrice nodded. "Could you contact him?" "Of course. I'll call him tomorrow." They sat talking in the kitchen for a long time, discussing clinic matters. Gradually, the tension faded and the conversation became lighter and more natural. When the clock struck midnight, Beatrice was surprised. The time had flown by. "It's late," she stood up. "I'm going to bed. Tomorrow's going to be a busy day. Good night." Manuel stood too. "And Beatrice, thank you for letting me in today, not just into the house, but, well, you know." She nodded silently and went upstairs. The next morning, they had a meeting with the representatives of the medical equipment company. A senior man in an expensive suit carefully reviewed the clinic's project, taking notes in his notebook. "It's an impressive plan," he said, closing the documents. "But I'm afraid your budget won't cover all the equipment listed in the specifications. A latest generation MRI machine alone costs a fortune." "We're aware," Manuel nodded. "But without it, a rare disease clinic won't make sense. Most diagnoses require precise imaging. Perhaps you should consider leasing or renting options," the representative suggested. "It would ease the financial burden." After he left, Beatrice stared at the calculations in confusion. "Manuel, he's right. Even with Maria's inheritance, we're short about $7 million to purchase all the necessary equipment. And we'll still need funds for staff salaries during the first months before the clinic starts operating at full capacity." Manuel thoughtfully tapped his fingers on the table. "I have an idea," he finally said. "I can sell my share in the capital clinic. We'll scrape together the rest somehow." Beatrice looked at him incredulously. "You are willing to sell your share in a successful business for this project?" "This clinic means much more to me than my share in Medic Prestige," Manuel answered seriously. "Not just because it was Mom's dream. I believe in what we're doing, Beatrice. Here, every penny will go to truly helping children, not to gilding ceilings and VIP rooms. But it's your money. Your future. Our future," he corrected her. "If we're partners, we both have to invest. Don't you agree?" Beatrice hadn't expected this turn. All these months, she had seen Manuel as a consultant, a helper, not as a full partner ready to invest his own fortune in the project. "I need to think about it," she finally said. "This is a very serious offer." "Of course," Manuel nodded. "Take your time. I just wanted you to know, I'm fully committed. For real, and for the long haul." Days passed steadily. The walls of the clinic rose despite the winter frost. Beatrice slowly assembled her team, conducting interviews in the cozy living room of the main house. Surprisingly, many specialists, once they set foot in the cherry orchard, fell in love with the place and agreed to work there despite its distance from the city. The middle of February brought an especially difficult week when a heavy snowstorm almost completely paralyzed traffic. Builders couldn't reach the cherry orchard, and material deliveries were delayed. Beatrice grew nervous, fearing delays in the construction schedule. One such day, as she was once again reworking budgets, trying to fit all the necessary expenses into their limited funds, her phone rang. It was Pablo Suarez, Maria's old colleague. "Senora Diaz, I heard about your project from Manuel." His voice sounded lively despite his age. "I discussed it with some colleagues from our medical community. Many are ready to help, with advice, with idle equipment, or even financially." "Really?" Beatrice could hardly believe her ears. "Absolutely. Maria Ramirez was a respected woman. Many of us feel it's our duty to support her final cause. I've compiled a list of people you should talk to. If you don't mind, I'll stop by in a few days once the roads are cleared." After that call, it was as if a dam had burst. Doctors, benefactors, and former patients of Maria began joining the project. Some donated money, others equipment, and others their time and expertise. It felt as though some special kind of luck was on their side at the Cherry Orchard Rare Disease Clinic. By early March, when the snow began to melt and the first spring birds sang around the estate, it became clear the clinic would happen. "I can't believe it's all coming together," Beatrice admitted to Manuel as they toured the nearly completed clinic building. "Just 3 months ago, it all seemed like an impossible dream." "You underestimate yourself," Manuel smiled. "It's your energy, your dedication that inspires people. They see how much of yourself you put into this, and they want to be part of it." Beatrice shook her head shyly. "It's a joint achievement. Your contribution is no less than mine." Manuel looked at her with a hint of sadness. "Do you know what Luisa told me during our last meeting? She said, you never lit up around me the way you do now with this clinic." "You officially broke up?" Beatrice asked cautiously. "Yes. The DNA test showed the child isn't mine. She's now with the child's father, the fitness trainer. They actually seem to love each other." "I'm sorry," said Beatrice, surprised to realize she genuinely felt sympathy rather than schadenfreude. "I'm not," Manuel shook his head. "Our relationship was built on the wrong foundation from the start. I didn't leave you because I loved her, I left because I was afraid. Afraid of responsibility when you started talking about children. I thought life would be easier with a carefree young girl, but I ended up facing exactly what I was afraid of, only worse." It was the first truly personal confession they had shared during all their time working together. Beatrice didn't know what to say, so she simply placed her hand on Manuel's shoulder. "It's for the best. Now you have something you can truly be proud of." He covered her hand with his own and said softly, "We have something we can be proud of. Together." Spring came into full bloom, and with it, new life arrived at the cherry orchard. The cherry trees were dressed in clouds of white and pink blossoms. The garden was filled with fragrances and birdsong. Even the estate itself seemed younger. Freshly painted walls gleamed under the April sun. The clinic's opening was scheduled for May. In the weeks leading up to it, everyone worked with triple the energy, installing equipment, arranging furniture, finalizing documents. Beatrice barely slept, overseeing every last detail. Manuel moved into the estate a week before the opening to help with everything. Their relationship slowly warmed, turning from strictly business into something resembling true friendship. They could spend hours discussing project details or simply sit quietly on the terrace, watching the sunset. The day before the opening, Beatrice was restless. She checked the guest list, the event program, and her speech for the 10th time. "Everything will be fine," Manuel reassured her. "The clinic is ready, the staff is in place, and the first patients are already scheduled for next week." "You achieved the impossible, Beatrice." "We achieved it," she corrected him with a grateful smile. "I couldn't have done it without you." The day of the opening was sunny and warm, as if nature itself was blessing their new beginning. Guests arrived, local officials, doctors, journalists, future patients with their parents. Beatrice stood on a makeshift stage at the entrance to the new clinic building, feeling a mix of pride and nervousness. Beside her stood Manuel, calm and confident, ready to support her at any moment. "Dear friends," she began, "I want to thank everyone who helped bring Maria Ramirez's dream to life. This clinic is not just a building full of equipment. It is a place where children with rare diseases will receive not only medical care but also support, understanding, and hope. We have created everything to ensure that young patients don't feel like they are in a hospital. There are play areas, family rooms, school classrooms to continue education during treatment. She paused, taking a breath, then continued. I especially want to thank Dr. Manuel Ramirez, whose professionalism and dedication made this project possible. His financial support, organizational skills, and medical experience were the foundation of our success. Manuel, standing beside her, looked at her in surprise. He hadn't expected such public acknowledgement. After cutting the red ribbon at the clinic's entrance, they led a tour for the guests. Bright patient rooms, modern equipment, the winter garden in the center, everything impressed the visitors. After the official ceremony, when most of the guests had left, Beatrice found Manuel in the old cherry orchard. He was sitting on a bench under a blooming tree, gazing thoughtfully at the new clinic building. "Thank you for your kind words," he said when she sat down next to him. "But you know I didn't do it for the praise." "I know," she nodded. "But that doesn't change the fact that your work deserves recognition. Without you, none of this would have been possible." They sat in silence for a while, savoring the quiet and the scent of blossoming cherries. "You have no idea how grateful I am to your mother," Beatrice said softly. "She gave me not just this estate and the money for the clinic. She gave me a new purpose in life, a new beginning." "Me too," Manuel nodded. "You know, in the past few years, I felt something was missing from my life. A prestigious job, good money, a young wife, but inside, there was emptiness. Now I understand what was lacking, a true purpose. Something that doesn't just bring money but actually makes the world a better place." A sudden gust of wind showered them with a rain of white petals. Beatrice laughed, brushing the flowers from her hair. "It feels like your mother is blessing us from up there," she said, pointing toward the sky. Manuel caught a petal in his hand. "I have no doubt about it." They sat in the garden until sunset, speaking about their future plans, about the first patients who would be arriving the following week, about the new treatment methods they hoped to implement. As twilight wrapped the estate, they returned to the house, feeling an extraordinary sense of unity and peace. Something had shifted between them during these months of working together. Old wounds faded, giving way to mutual respect, and perhaps the beginning of something new and bright. The Cherry Orchard Clinic opened its doors to its first patients, marking the start of a new chapter not just professionally, but personally, for two people who found their path to healing through a shared noble cause. That evening, after the opening ceremony, Beatrice and Manuel sat again in the old garden. The May night descended over the estate, bringing with it coolness and the scent of blossoming cherries. They sat on a bench, looking at the stars appearing in the darkening sky. "What are you thinking about?" Manuel asked quietly, breaking the cozy silence. "About how strangely life can turn out," Beatrice replied, hugging her shoulders. "Half a year ago, I couldn't even imagine being here with you after everything that happened." Manuel slowly took off his jacket and placed it over her shoulders. "You know, Beatrice, I have to tell you something." His voice sounded unusually serious. "All these months we only talked about the clinic, about work, about plans. But there's something I kept silent about." Beatrice's heart tightened. She wasn't sure she was ready for this conversation. "I love you," he said simply. "I never stopped, even after I betrayed you and left. It's not an excuse, just the truth." Beatrice froze. These were the words she had once desperately longed to hear, yet now they stirred a mix of emotions inside her. "Manuel, I don't know what to say," she shook her head. "There was so much pain. So many years have passed." "I'm not asking for an answer now," he said, staring ahead at the dark silhouettes of the trees. "I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know. These months working with you have been the best of my life, despite all the hardships." They returned to the house in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. That night, Beatrice couldn't sleep for a long time. Manuel's confession had stirred something deep inside her, something long buried under layers of hurt and disappointment. The next morning, she came down for breakfast, feeling strangely vulnerable. Manuel was already sitting in the kitchen, flipping through a newspaper. He looked up and smiled. "Good morning. Coffee's ready. Toasts will be done in a minute." No tension, no awkwardness after last night's confession. Just a normal morning, as if nothing had happened. "Thank you," she said, sitting opposite him and pouring herself some coffee. "We have a lot to do today. The first patients arrived this afternoon." I reviewed their medical histories, Manuel nodded. "Especially the complicated case of Santiago Fernandez, 8 years old, rare form of muscular dystrophy." And so they returned to their familiar rhythm, work, patients, discussing treatment methods. But something had subtly changed. Beatrice found herself looking for Manuel in the clinic's corridors, listening for his footsteps, noticing how he smiled at young patients, how patiently he explained complex medical terms to their parents. Weeks turned into months. The clinic was running at full strength, receiving children from all over the country. The Cherry Orchard became known in the medical community as a leading center for treating rare childhood diseases. Beatrice threw herself into work, but the internal dialogue with herself never stopped. One evening, after the last patient had been seen and the staff had gone home, Beatrice stepped into Manuel's office. He was sitting at his computer, reviewing research results. "Am I interrupting?" she asked, hesitating at the door. "For you, I'm always available," he said, leaning back in his chair, looking at her warmly. "Do you remember that conversation we had in the garden after the clinic's opening?" She sat down across from him. Of course, he tensed but didn't look away. "I've thought a lot since then." Beatrice nervously intertwined her fingers, "about us, about the past, about the future. And I realized that I'm scared. Scared to trust again. Scared that history might repeat itself." "That's only natural," Manuel nodded. "If I were in your place, I'd be scared too. But I also realized that I don't want fear to rule my life." She took a deep breath. "We've both changed, Manuel. You're no longer the selfish man who betrayed me. And I'm not the naive woman who blindly trusted. Where are you going with this?" There was hope in his eyes. "Maybe we should try getting to know each other again?" She smiled, feeling the burden lift from her shoulders. "Slowly, without rushing. Just give each other a chance." Manuel slowly reached across the table and gently touched her fingers. "I'm willing to wait as long as it takes and to do whatever it takes to earn your trust again." It was the beginning of a new chapter in their relationship. They began spending not only workdays but also evenings together, walking through the garden, watching old movies in the living room of the main house, sharing memories of the 5 years they had spent apart. Gradually, the wall between them melted, giving way to something deeper and more mature than youthful infatuation. At the beginning of autumn, when the garden was once again filled with ripening fruit and the scent of cherries hung in the air, Beatrice finally realized she was ready to trust Manuel again. They sat on the same bench where their conversation had taken place on the day the clinic opened. "You know, I'm grateful to your mother not just for the clinic," Beatrice said, gazing at the sunset that bathed the orchard in golden light. "She found a way to bring us back together, even after she was gone. She was always wiser than all of us." Manuel smiled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "She saw further than we could imagine." Their first kiss after so many years apart was gentle and careful, as if they were afraid to scare away the fragile happiness they had just found. A year had passed since the Cherry Orchard Clinic opened. The May morning was clear and warm. The estate was decorated with flowers and ribbons. Today, they were celebrating not just the clinic's anniversary but also the first graduating group of fully recovered patients. Beatrice stood on the front steps of the main house, watching as guests arrived, parents with children, doctors, journalists, representatives of charitable foundations. Over the past year, the clinic had gained fame far beyond the region. Their treatment methods for rare diseases were being adopted by colleagues across the country. Manuel came up behind her and embraced her, pulling her close. "What are you thinking about?" "About how much has changed in just a year," she smiled, turning to him. In the clinic, in my life, in us, all for the better. Definitely for the better. Among the guests, Beatrice spotted little Santiago Fernandez, their first and most difficult patient. A year ago, he couldn't walk unaided, but today he was running around with other children, only limping slightly. His proud, joyful parents stood nearby, their eyes never leaving him. "See Santiago?" Manuel said, following her gaze. "That's the real miracle. The reason we do what we do." The official part of the celebration was solemn but without unnecessary pomp. Beatrice and Manuel spoke about the clinic's achievements over the past year and shared their plans for the future, expanding the diagnostics department and building a facility for out-of-town parents whose children required long-term treatment. After the speeches and congratulations were over, and as the children and their parents scattered across the cherry orchard grounds, enjoying the festivities and the warm day, Manuel led Beatrice to a distant corner of the garden, to the oldest cherry tree. "Remember how we picked cherries here 15 years ago?" he asked, seating her on a bench under the tree. "I do," she smiled. "You ate too many and got a stomach ache." "I was always greedy," Manuel laughed. "For cherries, for life, for love. I wanted everything all at once, never knowing how to appreciate what I had. And now? Now, I cherish every moment with you," he said seriously. "Every morning when I wake up and see you beside me, every smile, every glance." He knelt down on one knee and pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "Beatrice, you gave me a second chance when I didn't deserve it. You taught me how to love again, how to value and protect what's precious. I know I don't deserve such happiness, but I promise to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of it. Will you marry me again?" Inside the box was a ring with a small ruby shaped like a cherry, just like the one he had given her when he first proposed 17 years ago. Beatrice stared at the ring, feeling tears well up in her eyes. So much time had passed, so much pain and joy, so many disappointments and hopes. "Yes," she said simply. "I'll marry you." Manuel slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed it, pouring into that kiss all the tenderness, gratitude, and love he carried in his heart. At that moment, Beatrice's phone rang. Reluctantly, she pulled away. "Sorry, it might be something important." It was the regional minister of health on the line. "Senora Diaz, congratulations on the clinic's anniversary. I have wonderful news for you. The government has awarded a grant to open branches of your center in 3 cities across the region. Are you ready to lead this project?" Beatrice looked at Manuel, who was still holding her hand, then at the happy children playing on the lawn, at the blossoming garden that had given its name to this special place. "Yes," she answered. "We are ready." After ending the call, she turned back to Manuel. "We've been offered a new project, opening branches in other cities. Think we can handle it?" He smiled. "Together, definitely," Beatrice nodded, squeezing his hand. The sun dipped toward the horizon, casting the cherry orchard in golden pink hues. Somewhere high above the clouds, Maria Ramirez was surely smiling, watching the 2 people who had found their way back to each other through pain, forgiveness, and their shared noble mission. Her final gift had turned out to be the most precious one of all. It had not only brought healing to sick children but also restored 2 wounded souls, granting them a second chance at happiness.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.